we can get started, and all right, let's get started now. So in the room here, I have Todd, Trevor, Rilling, Ergin, Shaoleng, and on the call, I have Hua, Huni, Ian, Jeff, Nansu, Ron, Tim, and Wei Wei. Have I missed anybody? Okay, so the agenda today is pretty much the same as what we had talked about last week. I sent out the feature list for version 2 release. Where I had actually sent out the link as well as the spreadsheet, which had a listing of all the versions, and I had hoped that folks would go through and check off what they thought was priority, but I checked and nobody had looked. If people had looked at it, they hadn't checked off on what they thought was priority. So that's something that we do need to finalize. And then we want to talk about the list of repositories that we are indexing and have some updates from all the team members. So we are still working on the help.
This is Ian. A question, Anu. I'm looking at the spreadsheet now. There's one column for priority. Do you want us each to fill in a copy? Do you want us to create a column to put our score in? What do you want us to do?
Yeah, I think if you could actually have just insert a column with your name.
Okay.
Or if somebody thinks something is priority and needs to go into version, you can just put in just a star or something there, and people can add in stars as they go. Look through, and almost like a voting system, I guess.
I'm adding a column, and what I'm going to put in there is what I'm going to put as value, where a high number means high value.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that'll work too.
Okay.
So maybe then we can get back to it, or if everybody could get to this feature list by the end of this week, we can finalize the list that we want to have for version 2 release.
Ian, are you scoring to 10?
I usually do 1 to 5, but I can do 10.
5 is fine. As long as 5 is fine. Just so that we know what the scale is.
Yeah, I'm just right.
Yeah, let's keep it consistent. If 1 to 5 is sufficient, then let's use that.
I'd find it hard
and that would be
between a 6 and a 7.
Right. So 5 would be highest priority.
Yes. Well, highest value.
Oh, okay. Highest value.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So is everyone agreed that by the end of this week, everybody could go in and maybe enter a number for what they think is a priority for each of the features? And then by the end of the week, or over the weekend, I'll go in and, just pull up all the numbers, and then we can determine next week when we have the meeting, if you're all agreed.
How do you want us to add priority?
Just put in a column, insert a column with your
Another
name.
column?
Huh?
Just add another column?
Yeah, right.
Individually?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I could change someone else's if I disagree with it.
I'm hoping that people don't have that much time.
Things could be tracked in. We can operate a system of trust here, or we can have a locked down, secure system. What do you want to do?
And also we have a help and a FAQ page, and I haven't seen anybody making any modifications there either. But I mean, last time I checked, I didn't see any modifications. So I think we need to maybe finalize. And if there are going to be any additional features coming in or modifications that we want to do, we will do it later.
Anu, can you send out the just the links in an email as well? Again, just so that
All the different ones.
well, we
Yeah,
send the
certainly.
slides, and it's hard to.
Okay. I can make a list of all the links and then just send it out.
Okay.
Although, if you go into the core dev folder in BioCaddy Google Docs, I mean in the Google Drive, you will find all of these available there. But I'll send out links again.
Ian, is one good or bad?
Bad. I think
1
Ian
is
will-
low value, 5 is high value, where value
gonna-
means value to an end user.
Okay, I'm going to note that in column F.
All right? Good. I can see you in there, I think.
I see a lot of people in
I'll
there.
just call it low priority.
Okay, I think this will help you, Anu. It's much clearer now how we can respond.
All right. Thanks, Joyce. So the next thing that we wanted to talk about is, Jeff, you have an update with regard to the updating of the repository.
Yep. Yeah, so we started, I think sometime Wednesday afternoon, and so this is the current spreadsheet of the complete reindex. We're done with 51 out of 60, and it's the larger ones that are left now. A lot of the time for a lot of the repositories, actually most of the time for the reindexing is actually spent on actually downloading and getting the data. But we are also collecting timings of the reindex process, and Yuling will put together a report after we're done with those timings. So this spreadsheet is live, and if you scroll down you can see what the current in process one is. Currently we're running this serially, and so the next run through will also work on doing more things in parallel.
So if it's, I see. Okay.
So, and according to what we have in the spreadsheet, I'm just counting there's 60 of them that we're doing.
Right.
The numbers that we have, yeah.
60 is the total number, right? So also, since we're talking about the repositories, Jeff, can you please ask Burak to send me the list of all the repositories that were pulled in from that, what was it, data?
Oh yeah. I can from
So
data.
I can enter that in. That would
Yep.
be easier for me to put that
Yep.
in here rather than going back and forth.
Yeah, I'll send Yuling an email right now.
Okay, thank you. So I can share this link as well for the repository updates, if anybody is interested in seeing. So how long do you think it would take to finish up with this?
I mean, it should finish fairly soon. I mean, again, it's the longer ones with their download times. So it should be hopefully this week.
All right.
Barak is, we have people who are having sick days, so I can ask Barak when he's.
Okay, so probably end of the week or something we should be done with. So this was updating of the index, right?
Yeah, this is a complete sort of reindex, and then we do have to work on the last point, work on the incorporation of the updated NLP process, and we also have to test that like we did last time, and check on performance and things like that. And I think the last one also, from what we'd reported, there was also a memory leak somewhere. So.
We need to take a look at that. Okay. So is it feasible that it will get done before version 2 release?
When is the is the updated NLP pipeline completed now? On the last call, you said it was still being worked on.
Right. GIA here still annotates the note, so we expect to be finished in the middle of February.
Mid-February.
Yeah.
Mid-February, okay. So mid-February, and what's the actual date of the release?
End of February. So probably that's not going to happen then.
Yeah, because it's going to take about 2 weeks to do testing, the incorporation and testing and things like that.
So I wonder, since this is going to be at the back end, even after the release, can we still maybe update at the back end?
Yeah, we can add the NLP data because it's not going to change any way that the system queries, from what I understand. So it shouldn't affect the system itself. And then once the new updated NLP data is there, then you can add any features that use that on top of that. So you should be able to slot the new data in.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can keep doing the NLP update even the way we release it at the end of February.
All right.
So Jeff mentioned the memory leak. What's that problem? Who can take care of this? Xiaoling, maybe?
Well, this was I don't know about the new version. We haven't tested the new version yet because we haven't received that. But the prior one we had to restart every once in a while.
Okay.
But I think that this is
yeah. Oh, okay. We'll
make
test
or
more.
rewrite.
Xiaoling probably also it's good that you do some kind of testing, say from multi-thread, things like that.
Yeah, and we'll definitely find it when we run it through on our side. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there should be a period of testing and validation prior to the public release, so that everything is in place, there are no problems, there are no bugs, and everything is smoothly running by the time of the release.
Right. So we'll talk about that in a little while, Ron.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's also why we talked about that. We'd when we get the NLP pipeline in mid-February, that we test that for a while, and then after the 2.0 release, we can bring in some of the sort of the re-index data, and then once the re-index data is there, then new features in 2.1 or whatever that use the NLP specific content, can be released.
Okay.
After the 2.0 release.
Yeah, I think the testing that Ron is talking about is different than the testing that you are talking about. So I asked Ruling, we were talking today about how we are adding or updating repositories on the UI and in general, and I asked her to create a workflow diagram so that we understand how the updating is getting done. Really, you just want to go through it because a lot of it is still manual copying and dump of indices across the different servers. So I just want to know if there's maybe a more easier, smoother, or maybe we need to put some process in place so that it runs smoother across the different sites.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I mean, this sort of shows how we've sort of been in development mode, because that middle column is basically, you know, the development environment, you know, and on the right side is the production environment.
Right.
So the question is, you know, do we want to, you know, when we just re-index, so this actually gets to the re-indexing question, right? So we just re-index a data set, you know, and there are no changes.
Yeah,
To any,
exactly.
you know, how do we want to move the data? So that is something that we can, you know, we can start discussing. Because then it isn't you know, it's the same as quote unquote development. You know, because the metadata hasn't, the metadata model of that repository hasn't changed. So it might just be additional data sets that are listed.
And also, if an index gets updated, not just re-indexing, right? If we are updating the index and we have pulled in new data.
Yeah, so new data without a metadata change, right?
Yeah.
We should be able to move directly from, you know, ingest to production, you know, with some checks. And so there's a way to do that by using sort of aliases.
So just a moment, Jeff. I think Ruiling wants to talk a little bit about some remapping that they've been doing here before updating the UI. So maybe Ruiling can go over exactly the steps that's done, and then we can talk about.
Okay. So because I will mention that even there's no model change, we still need to update the mapping manually, because we need to add not analyzed field and for the filters, and we need to add format filter state. So maybe first I can go through the whole workflow. So first, I think Barak will put the ingested index to your Elasticsearch endpoint. Then we need to manually dump index to the Elasticsearch endpoint at UT help. Then we need to manually do the remapping after the mapping, and we need to update the source code of the user interface. Then we can show. So then we can check the website on the internal Biopathy website. So after that's development server. So after everything looks fine, we will manually dump update the index to the ES endpoint at UCSD server, and then we update source code on the public Biopathy website. So that's the whole workflow.
Right. But if we're just re-indexing and there's no change in the document structure for a repository, then the mapping that was already done is still valid for the update, right? There's no change in any of the elements.
But I think they do add some two fields that they need for the UI. So I was asking Ruiling if it was possible to circumvent that step.
But they're adding, in the slide it says it's the updating of the mapping.
Yeah,
so that's the mapping itself. That's not the data itself, right? If I understand correctly.
Yes. When you index, you need to specify your mapping first.
Right. Yeah. But so basically, we re-index a repository.
Again?
We don't do re-index. We just change the mapping.
I'm not sure why you need to change the mapping. It's just the index with no change in document elements.
Right, yeah, that's correct. So my point is we cannot just dump the index to the production server. We still need to like change the mapping of the index first.
Right, but the mapping isn't changing. I mean, why don't we take this offline? We can set up a call to go over this.
Okay.
Because you should just be able to keep the same mapping and just, add new data with that same mapping. So.
Maybe I can show the differences between two mapping.
So maybe Jeff, we can schedule a call, and then talk about this, and I think it would be good for Jeff also to understand exactly what we are changing.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we can also go over some of the ways that you can handle sort of the re-indexing by using some aliases within Elasticsearch to do that.
Okay. So we talked about the feature list. The release date for version 2 is currently February 28th, and we would like to do the testing or initiate the testing at least by February 16th. So that's about less than 2 weeks, where we will have testing maybe for about a week, and that will give a little bit of time. And as we are doing testing for the last couple of times, we have been fixing the bugs as the testing is getting done. So that will give us about 2 weeks to have the testing going on, as well as have bug fixing or anything that's like critical that needs to be fixed can be fixed. So in the next week, we will have an updated list of all the features that we want to have, and that way we can also generate the testing plan for version 2. And I would like to ask for volunteers who would like to test version 2 as well.
We'll do some of that at NIH.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Anu, just let Yu-Ling know,
Okay.
and she'll round up a bunch of people here.
Okay. And Ron, you said you can have some folks from NIH, right?
Yeah, Ian and I can round up some people.
Okay. So with the repository mapping information that we've been talking about, I just have a quick question. I saw Huni was on the line. So Huni, it's been either you or Nansu, right, that's been updating the repositories that are being done at UCSD, the BMI site.
Mhm.
So I see here, I'm still a little confused because I see that the update for DATS 2.1 mapping was done on November 2nd. However, it says here that the sample data was generated on the 29th of November. And I wonder if the dates are a little off maybe.
No, because these works are all done by undergrad and they don't work regularly, and the exam schedule affects a lot too. So yeah, it looks a little bit scattered, but that's how it was done.
No. I'm just thinking the date for sample data generation has to be before the mapping is done, right?
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Usually.
For as far as I understand, usually, right?
So what we are doing is
Also,
mapping.
So I wonder exactly. That's why I wanted to ask. So whenever you do the transformation script and the mapping, that's where you say that's the date.
So okay. So what do you mean by mapping? So is it the JSON file creation, or so the mapping that I'm talking about is just a spreadsheet-based column to entity or property level of mapping. So we don't need to look at the real data at that point. Of course, seeing a few cases would help, but we don't really touch the real data at that point.
So I think
So for us, sample data generation is more like a data download.
Of the whole repository?
Hi, let me explain this one. This is Nansu. Hello?
Yeah, hi. Go ahead.
Hi. Okay, so what do we mean by mapping is like when we analyze data sets, actually we are extract the schema we want to map. So basically that time we don't have. So we do the mapping, then after mapping, then we generate the sample data, and based on the sample data and the mapping, we have the mapping. We have the transformation files. So basically, when you see that the dates of the sample generation or the all data generation, they don't have much a big time gap in our case. I don't know whether I answered your question or not.
I think the what adds to this now too is that you're also having to do a bit of pre-work.
Right. Right.
Some of the data you're getting, you have to actually extract in certain ways, and that's why you sort of have to do a
right. So actually, our understanding of the sample is we are not considering the pre-processing and the sample generation. So I think there's a confusing here.
Right. I think whenever we've had any of our folks like Syed who would go in to a repository, and if the repository didn't have a direct download of data, if you had to, kind of crawl the data and, scrape some data or the metadata, then after he scraped it and generated what the metadata could potentially be, right, along with some data points, that is what we call the sample data, correct?
What we did is like we first analyze which part we wanted to scrape.
Yeah. So, and that's the date that's listed above. So Anu, the dates are correct in that sense, right? They're sort of the pre-analysis, which was
right.
For
right.
on November 2nd, and then they had with Thanksgiving they basically built the scraper, crawler, whatever it had to do, and generated their sample data by the 29th.
Oh, I see. So that column, that row is then missing from here, because we didn't build that into this.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so there is the one more part. Then we download the pretty much entire data set. So where do we put it? So we are kind of using the sample data field to indicate that part of the work.
You're downloading the entire.
Yeah, frequency entire, not necessarily entire in every cases, but
Yeah, I mean, you could just leave it in the comments. I mean, I think it's fine the way it's done.
okay.
No, so I was trying to update the dates based on what is entered here into the other spreadsheet. So I'm just trying to understand exactly how.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it maybe mapping. I'd call it maybe or whatever we want to call it. We sort of need a different name because it's not mapping. It's sort of a
I mean, it is stats mapping.
Yes, but not of the sample data. It's mapping of.
No. It's
yeah,
just
sort of the,
column to column mapping.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's. Anu, whatever makes it easier on you, whatever you want to help.
For me to understand. I mean, I don't mind leaving it as is since I
maybe
now.
sort of initial data specification. I mean, maybe data specification complete on November 2nd. I mean, that doesn't use any conflicting words.
Right. Okay.
Okay, data specification. Okay.
Because I was a little confused because the mapping that we were talking about all this time, I thought happened after we did the transformation.
Yeah. This
so
is, this
I was
is.
like, okay.
I see.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I see.
Actually, now what you understand the mapping is the part of ingestion. Actually, what we understand in mapping is like how we establish the mapping, like before ingestion.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's maybe makes confusing.
Okay. That's
So
fine.
I would suggest straightening it out offline and then putting this down on a one-pager, showing the flow chart of how this is done and what is done at each step. That way we can have a consistent record of how this was done, and we can always refer back to it in the future if anyone ever asks.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
So I think we have a little bit of time, and so we want to go over updates of the list that we have currently. So, CUNY,
Yes.
your team is working on 4 repositories currently, right?
Yes, we are. Yep.
Okay. And you have a meeting today?
With ENCODE right after this call.
Okay.
Just a quick
So
introduction. Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody wants to join in, they're welcome to join in. It's right after this call, and it's CUNY's team will be talking to the ENCODE folks for mapping. And the next thing that we want to talk about is the indexing NLP work. So, Xiaoling, do you have an update?
We are annotating more documents to change the NLP model. So, and we also will integrate the terminology server into the NLP.
That's already done, right?
Yes.
So for the bulk download of indices, it has to be done on the UI side, right? That's what I understood. So
Yeah,
last time,
But we
just
talked
said
about
that-
this last week, right? That we wanted to
Right,
have
right.
a link. So I mean, we can generate sort of the bulk files. That way they don't impact the indices when people do bulk downloads. And the
Okay.
question is, where do we want to place the files, and where on the interface would people download them?
Okay. So maybe we can look into that. So right now we have, we display all the data sets in a repository when they click on the repository name. So when we are displaying all the data sets, is there like a link that we can put in where we say download all the data sets or download the index here?
Right now we will have a pattern.
Right. Is that a reasonable, so currently if you go in, for example, let's say, if you click on the, okay, I thought,
So we see the slide still.
yeah, I thought I was sharing the, so currently the way it's actually set up for anybody to go in and look at all the data sets that are available from one specific repository is actually to go and click on the repository name, and then you see all the data sets getting displayed. So I wonder if there is maybe some spot here where we tell them, or you can tell them next to the, so when we say bulk download of indices, we are going to provide them individual index, right, for each of the repositories.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that's what the
That's what
discussion had been,
that's
right?
what it
So I mean,
has.
on the prior page, you could put that download icon next to each of the repositories, right?
Right here somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere visible, yeah.
So we will create a zip file for them to download.
Yeah, I mean, when we do the processing and the indexing, we can also add a procedure to create a zip file.
Okay. And that's usually enough, as in, I mean, does it become very big or not?
It depends on the repository. Some
Right.
may big, right?
Right now the largest one is like 70 megabytes, but there's a new repository, the size of that one is 60.
Oh.
We haven't integrated that one yet.
So if you zip it, how small can we make it? I'm just thinking about how feasible is it to zip and download, let people download. Right?
That might be, I guess.
So is there some other way besides zipping of letting people
Can we
download?
provide FTP?
Is it possible to provide an FTP site? Download?
I mean, we haven't set one up. I don't think we have a public FTP site for Biocat. I mean, we could also. I mean, what's the issue with the?
So I just want. So Relink says there is one repository which is like 60 gigs right now.
Oh, is that Tremble?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be. Either that, or we can put them in Amazon. And that's another option. And then let people do with it what they want. They can connect to them.
So if we're going to put them on Amazon, what happens So this is a service that's maintained by ECMP, right? Or is that free? Or how does it go?
Well, if we sign up for Commons credit,
Oh, we could do that, yeah.
yeah. I
think
assume
the
these
deadline
qualify. I mean, we are NIH funded, and these are quote unquote, in a sense, data sets that people can analyze and run their own experiments on, just like we did with the challenge.
Right.
So what's the data?
The data would be the raw indices that people could download of the documents.
And that means what? An index that can be imported into Elasticsearch? Or is it
Yeah, that can be brought into Elasticsearch, or people can bring into their own, just like people did with the challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, it might qualify for Commons credit.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I think they're still trying to understand exactly how they're doing it. You'd have to go to the BD2K webpage, that's data science at NIH, to see what's listed as potential opportunities for the Commons credits.
You know, it's going to sound like a bit of robbing Peter to pay Paul, and robbing Peter in this case involves an application process and overhead to do it, and the argument might be, well, isn't it much simpler and involve less overhead just to take it out of the BioCaddy funds, which when it comes down to it, it's all coming out of the same pot. So let's find the easiest route to the money.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple for us to put them in Amazon. I mean that's not going to be the cost there. Question is just in terms of downloads. But I mean, we can calculate. We can calculate that.
Okay.
And the other question is if CloudView has a public FTP server already available, then we can put it there. So we might want to ask CloudView.
Okay.
I mean, the other question, Jeff, I mean, part of the thing that's unanswered here is who's asking for this, and is this the best way of doing it? Because at the same time, we have the request for API access. And is a simple answer here that would cover this as well, to provide access to the Elasticsearch endpoint?
Yes and no. So for the large indices, crawling through that is not very efficient. Using just if you want to download everything, especially out of the large indices, it's much more efficient to basically.
I mean, rather than us analyzing it, right, is an approach here to say, hey, look, we can provide you access to the endpoint. Take a look at that and tell us if that does what you need. Then we get into an iterative loop with the person who's requesting it fairly quickly.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. I'm not sure exactly where. I mean, from what I remember, there was a request for like access to the entire index, but if there's, if it's mainly about services, then yeah, the services route would be fine.
Did we end up being able to track this back to the person who was asking for it?
I want to say this came from the Cedar group, but I'll confirm that. So in terms of improving the tracking system, I think we have like a working system right now that we are testing, and hopefully in about 2 weeks we would be able to implement it on the development side at least, so it can be tested. As far as similar data sets,
so we already expanded this function to 43 repositories, and because we are adding more repositories, we can expand it to other new repositories.
so as we are adding repositories, we just keep expanding this, right? Okay. So for the sorting function, right now we have the sorting function for date and title, right? I mean, by default, we don't have it by title, correct?
No, we have date. It's the date field in the repository. And relevance.
Relevance is by default, right? So are we going to do author, repository, title, or not? So that we have, for the repositories, we have it in, no, we don't.
How to sort that repository?
So basically, you would group all the results from each repository, I guess. You know what? Does that make sense?
So like array class will be the first.
No. I guess so. It would be. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right now, the sorting across all the repository has a function.
Right. So does it make sense to do it?
So sort by. So you want to group by repository, so you can just put that function in order to download.
So that can actually be removed because it's part of the facet, right?
Yeah.
And author no, right?
Not all repositories have the author
Information.
and many data sets have multiple authors. So, hold on.
Do we allow people to search based on authors?
Just search by all the stuff.
So then we can just remove author, repository, also title, right? So date is the only.
And citation count.
But do we have citation counts only for GEO,
Only for
correct?
GEO, yeah.
And there's no way we can expand that, correct?
Unless we have a citation count from that repository.
Okay. So in terms of the fields that should be displayed for each repository, we are actually checking the repository website itself before determining what fields need to be displayed. And also we had a discussion today about how we would have maybe one of the curators kind of go in and let us know what field should be used as a facet for each repository. So can we have that somehow shown and maybe GitHub, where we have all the transformation scripts? Would that help?
Well, I mean, as part of DATS, I mean, wouldn't there be some common facet elements within DATS that we could define?
But they could be different for different repositories.
Right, but if we say that organism is something that probably should be faceted,
Right.
I mean, if it has organism, great, then it gets faceted. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
but
would we want to do this? That's right. I mean, because if we do it against the DATS model, then we basically get a listing of potential faceted fields, and then when for each repository, that it's just the ones that match the ones that are flagged in DATS as to be faceted, right?
yeah.
So we can add a column to that spreadsheet and have a facet true or false.
This one, right?
Yep.
So the determination of whether it should be a facet or not would arise from the usefulness, right? Not necessarily the frequency of.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think Yulin can take a look, and since she has much more experience curating?
Yeah, she can,
Yes,
we can get first pass, yeah.
Thank you.
The other point about facets, is whether they are the facets that show up, and to some extent we have this, right? The facets that show up depend on what you're looking at. So you don't necessarily show all facets, but the basic point is I think you made was a good one, which is it's a question of whether it's useful. But whether it's useful or not depends on the context. And if the facets only show up when they're useful.
So right now, the way the information that shows up on facet is decided is where either Xiaoling or Yuling go in and say, okay, this is what we want to display as a facet. So they're going through all the metadata from a repository. They're looking at the mapping, and then they're saying, okay, these are the things that should probably be displayed as facets, and that's what we're seeing. Whereas I think it should be done plausibly by somebody who knows the domain better. And as you say, it might be very contextual, but we still need to have some kind of a general framework.
I mean, I don't know how I'm talking about, thinking about this in general terms and thinking of, all right, I use my favorite example. If I'm searching on Home Depot, the facets that show up depend on what I'm looking at. So if I'm looking at refrigerators, then it'll show something up that tells me whether it's got a freezer or not. But that facet is not there if I'm looking at something else. But this may only become more of an issue once we get to deeper indexing, and at the moment we're not really doing the level of indexing that we have is restricted to DATS. But you can imagine that, for example, if you were looking at a proteomics data set, then certain other things to filter on become relevant. But that may be something that's in the, certainly in the future, that we don't have detailed indexing information about proteomics data sets, unless we were to take something from the Omics DI index.
Right, and
But
I also...
even so, there may be certain things that it would make sense to show or not, depending on what you're looking at.
So but the facet still has to be for each repository. Oh, you mean based on the search, you then...
Well, I mean, an example would
generate
be
facets?
if I was searching the genomic data commons, a facet for species wouldn't make sense, because all of that data is human. But if I was looking at geo, then a facet to show species makes sense. Now, there may be complex models for that, and more complex than we want to get into, but I'm not being specific about it. What I'm suggesting is that that's worth thinking through.
Right, and even with the genomic data commons, I mean, it might be, if someone isn't familiar with the genomic data commons, knowing that all the data is human, might be useful as well.
Right.
So, depending on your search at Home Depot,
in that case,
might only be one vendor,
show.
and it will show that one vendor as the only facet.
Right.
So is there a way to actually generate facets based on the search itself, or on the search term? As Ian.
Well, it's based on the returned documents from the search, right?
Yeah, right.
You specify the fastest field, but the content from that field is based on the search result.
Correct. Right. But what Ian is suggesting is which field should become a facet field could be determined by the returned content. Is that possible, or?
Then I have no idea.
Oh, okay. Just do you know if that's doable within Elasticsearch?
Well, I mean, they do they call their facets aggregations, but what are you're trying to? I didn't quite hear the.
So the idea is that right now what's being shown as a facet, say for example, let's say we do breast cancer, right? So if you have breast cancer coming up here, you have these are the typical facets that come up whenever we have a mixture of data, right? But if you pick one particular repository, then for each repository the facet that comes in and what? So the facet that comes in for each repository is determined by what's been selected to show up as a facet already at the back end. Is that correct? So I guess Ian is suggesting that
you need to be thinking about a scalability problem here. If the behavior that you're talking about ends up being hard-coded, I mean, we don't want a bunch of spaghetti code that says, if it's this repository, do this. If it's this repository, do the other. If this is to be scalable, it needs to be data-driven. metadata driven, essentially.
Right, and that's why focusing it on DATS elements themselves would probably make more sense, right? Because those cross repositories.
And I'm inclined to the thing that you were suggesting, Jeff, which is by and large simpler, which is, don't get into whether GDC has, which species GDC has, and only listing those, just list it anyway, because as you say, that gives useful information.
So if there's a facet like organism, and there's a repository that doesn't list organism, right, or within a repository there's some that are missing, you can always add a facet, add metadata where organism is unspecified. And then
Correct.
unspecified could show up as one of the members of the facet. And you'd even have a count. So if unspecified doesn't show up, everything you're looking at has an organism specified. Otherwise it might say unspecified 10, in which case you can review that, or 2,000, and something's going on there. You better investigate. But that would still, again, keep the user in control rather than hiding things from the user.
Right. So right now it's hard-coded. I think doing it with DATS might be better.
So set a common set of metadata, but do the unspecified. So everything gets tagged, but it could be tagged unspecified.
But if you then do it on DATS, what happens to, very specific metadata which might be useful? Like, for example, the strategy that is showing up here may not be there in all of them, right? It's going to be there in only a couple of repositories.
If you decide that you want to use that, then that has to become part of DATS, and again, you tag things as unspecified.
But that's of no use. Then you have a lot of facets coming up on the side here.
It would just be unspecified. This many are missing. Remember that it's with respect to your search results, not with respect to the facets, or with respect to your search results, not with respect to the entire.
Oh, I see. You just have one facet which says unspecified.
Yes, one facet says organism unspecified. In your particular search results, there are 200, so it'd have 200 out.
Okay.
Right?
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, can we ask Ulink to take a look and then get back to us? When do you think would be a good idea?
Yeah, no, I already sent her email.
Okay. So maybe we revisit this in 2 weeks' time or a week's time?
Yeah, I think you should be able to, we can shoot for next week.
Okay. Okay, I think we've actually exceeded the time already. So we will revisit some of the things that we discussed this time next week. And is there anything else that we need to talk about quickly before we sign off for the day or for the week? If not, then thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.